Bob, thank you for that very, very kind introduction. To be compared with Scoop Jackson is quite a tribute, quite an honor, so I thank you very much. And let me thank you for holding this forum towards a democratic Russia. I think it's absolutely essential that we talk about Russia. I want to thank Freedom House. I want to thank the Foreign Policy Initiative for putting this together, and thank you all for being here. What an incredible turnout. We have to get a larger room for you next time. That's good. David Kramer, who was a former member of the Helsinki Commission and very actively involved on the human rights agenda, bringing the administration and Congress together on human rights issues. I thank David for his help and leadership as we marshaled the Magnitsky bill through the Foreign Relations Committee, and I'll talk a little bit about that. But first, I want to underscore the point that Bob made as far as Russia is concerned. We have an incredible strategic interest in Russia. We are the United States, Russia, the two leading nuclear powers in the world. We have a responsibility to move this nation, move our continent, move our world towards a more safe societies, to rid ourselves of the threat of nuclear confrontation. Russia and the United States needs to work together on that. We have common interest in many regions of the world. We should be together on Syria. We should be together on so many other the strategic problems around the world. So we have a real interest to build a stronger relationship between the United States and Russia. We are 2 of the 5 permanent members of the Security Council of the United Nations. We need to work together in a close way to advance peace and prosperity around the world. But it's very difficult to do that in the type of closeness we need without there being a democratic Russia. And that's been our concern, is to tell a country that's important and relevant to us that we want to help them and assist them in understanding their commitments internationally towards human rights. And that's the reason we raise these issues. The Commission for Security and Cooperation in Europe, now known as the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, was formed in 1975 under that premise, Bob, that security cannot be achieved without advancements on human rights and economic security. You need to have all three. And yes, Russia has a strong military presence. We understand that. They're a very significant country. They need to continue to make advancements on human rights. Instead, we find under President Putin an administration that appears to be moving in the wrong direction on the human rights and democratic front. And that it should not be acceptable to us, and it should not be acceptable to the Russian people. We hear that President Putin says, give us time, be patient. Well, in many cases, when you ask for time and patience and you talk and don't act, it's an effort to avoid and move in the wrong direction. And we see that happening in Russia today. Human rights, there shouldn't be patience in advancing human rights. We should all demand that these progress be made. So I want to talk a moment about how we perceive moving forward on the human rights agenda with Russia, engaging the international community, not trying to do this ourselves, and trying to engage Russia itself. And I think you're all familiar with the tragedy of Sergei Magnitsky, a 37-year-old lawyer who was representing in a company, and in that effort, American company, in that effort discovered that there was widespread corruption that was preventing him from representing his client, and also affecting the country he loved. So he found it an obligation to let the authorities know about the corruption that he discovered in the course of his representation. And as a result of his whistleblowing as to the corruption that was widespread in his community, he was arrested. He was arrested without charges, basically. He was sent to prison, and he was tortured. He was in need of medical attention. A doctor was literally outside of the prison cell, not allowed to see Sergei Magnitsky, and he died in prison a little over 2 years ago as a result of these incredible abuses of his rights. The people who were responsible, and there have been investigations that have been done, and we know the people who were responsible. That's without dispute. The people who are responsible not only for the initial corruption, but also for his imprisonment, his torture, and the cover-up afterwards, are well known. And those individuals have not been held accountable. To the contrary, these individuals have been promoted and been given honors and have been rewarded for their corrupt activities. That cannot allowed to continue. It's not a cause just in the United States. It's a cause also in Russia. It's a cause also in countries around the world, that we cannot allow that type of human rights violations to go without accountability. So where should the accountability be? It should be in Russia. Russia should take action. They should rid their society of corruption, and they should hold people who have violated the trust of the Russian people and who have violated the rights of the Russian citizens. They should be held accountable for their actions. And the fruits of their corruption should be available to the Russian people. They should not be allowed to be hidden and used for the personal gain of those who have perpetrated these human rights violations. That's where the Magnitsky Bill comes in. The Magnitsky Bill builds on that premise, and it says to those who have perpetrated gross human rights violations that we're not going to let you take your profits and take them to America. After all, they don't really want their money in rubles. They would like to have them in euros or dollars, and more recently, I think dollars and euros. So I think that's where they want to keep their money, and we had evidence that some of the people involved in the Magnitsky tragedies have had their money in U.S. banking accounts. They also like to visit America. Some of their family members are in America. They go to school in America, and they want to come here. But what we can do is deny them the privilege of visiting America by denying them visas, and we can deny them the opportunity to use our banking system by freezing assets that they may put into the American banking system. And if other countries follow the U.S. leadership, then you're effectively cutting off much of what the gains could be from their corrupt activities. That's what the Magnitsky Bill is about. Its objective is kind of simple. Its objective is to get Russia to act. We want Russia to hold their violators accountable. We want Russia to be a democratic state. We want Russia to respect basic human rights. For many of the reasons, first, as Senator Kerry said, it's in our DNA. It's true. This is part of our values, and we think these are universal values. It's part of our DNA. It's part of our national security agenda. We want stable regimes. We want countries that we can trade with on a reliable basis. We want countries who have valuable resources for those resources to be available in a stable way internationally. That's why we are concerned about the Middle East, and we want stable regimes. We may have had strategic partners. Mubarak was president of Egypt, but it was not a stable country, as we saw, because it didn't respect human rights. It didn't have democratic procedures. We want, for the purposes of stability, we want to see countries respect the rights of their citizens and establish democratic principles. So it's in our interest to get Russia to change. It's not to penalize the perpetrators. That's not our objective. Our objective is to get the type of changes in Russia that we think are important for the Russian people and for the international community. And that's the objective of the Magnitsky legislation. Now, we have a real opportunity to move this bill forward, as was pointed out, because this is also the time that Russia is entering the World Trade Organization, the WTO. And the Jackson-Vanik laws that were passed in the 1970s, they were passed as a statement of human rights for America, that we didn't want to do normal trade relations with a country that denied its citizens the right to leave their country, emigrate from their country to another country. And it was aimed at the Soviet Union. No question about it. The Soviet Union was the nation denying its citizens the right to emigrate. Although the bill was global in its application, it applied to any non-market economy. And it had a major effect for its day. It did put a spotlight on the abusive practices of the former Soviet Union in denying the right of its own citizens to emigrate, which is a basic international human right. And we were able to get countries to change as a result of Jackson-Vanik. But it also showed the world that the United States was prepared to lead. And I must tell you, it was the United States that said we will use trade to put a spotlight on the apartheid government of South Africa, and we will deny South Africa trade with the United States as long as it is an apartheid government. And the rest of the world said, gee, maybe we shouldn't use trade. It hurts the people of the country. It's not a polite thing to do. Why don't we just talk about it and have forums and have meetings, but don't take action such as denying trade to the country? We said no. We said we have to use the tools that are available. We use trade. The rest of the world followed the U.S. leadership. And as you know, South Africa changed its government with a minimal amount of bloodshed. So U.S. leadership is critically important internationally. There are countries in Europe today that are watching what's happening in the United States on the Magnitsky Bill. They're going to follow. They won't lead, but they will follow. And we need to show that leadership. So one of the important lessons of Jackson-Vanik was that the United States needs to lead. Now, Jackson-Vanik, I think most would acknowledge, is no longer relevant to the current challenges of human rights globally. So that is why this is a fitting substitute or change from the Jackson-Vanik laws to move towards the Magnitsky laws that say basically that human rights violators, there will be penalties imposed if they're not held accountable by their own country, penalties that we control ourselves, the right to visit and the right to use our banking system. As I indicated before, the Jackson-Vanik law was initiated because of activities within the Soviet Union. The Magnitsky law has been initiated because of activities within the Russian Federation. But we do believe it should be global. This is not aimed at one country. I understand our objective in this forum is to get a democratic Russia. Absolutely. But we can use this also to advance international standards. And that's why one of the reasons that we feel pretty passionately about this being global in its effect. We hear frequently from those who say, well, aren't we just meddling into the internal affairs of another country? I would hope that that has been discredited by now, those types of statements. I can point to the fact that Russia is a signatory of the OSCE, and in the OSCE, they agreed to certain basic rights, and in that document, any other signatory state can question the activities of what's going on in another member state. So the United States has every right to challenge what's happening in the Russian Federation. We're both signatories to the OSCE. Or I could just mention the basic human rights issues are global in nature, and then any country has the right to challenge another country's violation of internationally established human rights standards. Not what the United States thinks is right, is what we believe are global standards for advancing human rights. We are making progress on this bill. It did receive a favorable report, a unanimous vote in the Senate Foreign Relations Committee yesterday as a standalone bill. The chairman of the Senate Finance Committee has indicated that he will be combining this bill with the PNTR vote, which is necessary for Russia to enter the World Trade Organization. So I think we will get a pretty clean vote on this issue. And I must tell you, the last point I want to mention on this, one of the reasons we do this is to help the Russian people. I have received numerous contacts from members of the citizens of Russia, from members of the Duma, who have said that Russia can do better than they're doing today, and that we're right to challenge what happened to Magnitsky. So this is important for the people of Russia to see their country do better, which we know that they can. I tell you, coming to this room and seeing it overflowed with people give me optimism that we will achieve these objectives. One of my major concerns is whether we have enough of a focus on the human rights side. There's a lot of focus on the national military side. There's a lot of focus on economic development issues, but are we focusing on the human rights side? And quite frankly, one of the struggles here is to get our own State Department to focus more on human rights. I applaud Secretary of State Clinton. I think she is focused on human rights. And I congratulate her on her leadership in raising these issues around the world. But we are dealing with a large federal agency, the Department of State, that has agendas throughout the world. And I think we need to elevate the importance of human rights in the State Department. I'm told, why do we need this bill? After all, the State Department today has the authority to deny visas to those who violate human rights, and they do. It took a year and a half, over a year and a half, after the tragedy, for the State Department to take action on the Magnitsky perpetrators. And they only did that because of the spotlight that Congress put on this issue. So it's important that we institutionalize this in order to be able to show our leadership and to show that this is not just a fad of the moment, but a real legacy of what we want to do to advance human rights. Seeing you all here interested in this subject give me hope that we will indeed elevate the importance of human rights, which will add to the security of America and to global security. Thank you very much for having this forum. It's a pleasure to be with you.